Hey, welcome back. Today we're going to revisit the Laravel starter kit that I published a while back. I spent some time recently adding a facade over all the Docker compose commands that you normally have to type in. I think it's a lot easier to use. So let's take a look at some of the code. I'll drop the URL for the GitHub repo in the documentation. But as you can see here under my account, rcravens, I have / it's a docker _starter _for _Laravel. And as I was using this often, I really found that I didn't mind typing in the long commands. And what I'm talking about is, if I kind of pull up over here, some of the old commands, I would have to type in like docker compose up -d and then -- build nginx to get the whole thing started. And I've personally used this for a long time like this, and I would just type in the commands that I needed. I created some aliases. So for example, I had like an alias like dc was equal to docker compose, and I had other aliases like dcr was docker compose run --rm, that type of thing. And it looks like on this line I misspelled compose. There should be not composer but compose. But anyway, you get the idea. I had these aliases, so I could shorten this up a little bit, but in essence I was always kind of typing these docker compose commands to interact with all the different services that are in our environment. So the biggest improvement I made to the starter kit is I added a facade over all those commands. So now instead of typing all of this docker compose up -d, you can just say kit start and it will start up the application. And then you can say things like kit stop or kit restart or kit destroy. And so all of these different commands, I just kind of shortened them up under the hood. When you did kit start, it would run all of this for you. And I think it makes it a lot more palatable and a little easier to remember. The other thing that I added was I made it even easier to get started. So I added a kit create command, and we'll go through kind of that in detail. But what that does is that creates, based upon your .env file, it creates the application directory, it clones in Laravel, and there's a lot of other things it does under the hood for you. And at the very end, you have your web browser and it's up and running. All right, so with that kind of lead in, let's go ahead and take a look at this. And so what I'm going to do is just kind of go through, I updated the documentation for all the new kit commands. And down here, you can kind of see them where it says usage. You can see the /kit, because this is a shell script. So I added an alias that I don't have to put the / in there. All the documentation will function as it is, but if you don't like to type the /, which gets a little annoying after a while, you can add that alias also. And I put a little note at the top on kind of how to add that alias. So here's the tip at the very top. So it says, you can add this alias so that you don't have to type all the / anymore. You can just type kit. So with that said, here's a quick start guide. There's really kind of 3 steps here. So the first step is to set up a directory structure and clone this repo in my environment over here. What we're looking at here is PHP Storm. And if I print the working directory, I have this kind of sandbox directory that's in my desktop. And if I look inside this directory, there's nothing in there. And then you can see at the top also nothing in there. So once again, we're going to copy these commands. We're going to go back over to our environment and we'll paste these in. All right, so those commands, I made a directory called projects. So now you should see a project directory here. And this project directory is kind of your high level directory that holds all the information about your project. Inside project, there's another directory called Docker. And inside that Docker directory, I cloned down this repo. So you can see here, so there's a git clone. I cloned it down, the starter kit. So you have that available to you in that Docker directory. And then I switched directories into this Docker directory. So now I have access to the kit commands. All right, so once I'm inside this Docker directory, I have access to all the kit commands. And you can see the kit commands here. And you can see, for example, kit create, kit build, kit start. We talked about those a little bit earlier. There's a kit open to open up the browser tab to the application. Just a lot of kind of easy access, friendly, commands that you can interact with your environment. So if you need Horizon running, you can kit Horizon start or kit Horizon stop or kit Horizon destroy. If you need the cron to run, so you got these scheduled commands going all the time, you can start up the cron or you can stop it or destroy it. There's also a helper method to Once you have the application running, you can SSH into kind of that container, and then you get the kind of the terminal window access for whatever that container is. And then there's helper methods. So if you want to access Artisan, you can just type kit artisan and put whatever their command is. So for example, kit artisan q:work. Same thing with Composer. You can access Composer commands and npm commands. So you can do git npm install or whatever you're going to do. All right, so that's where we're at after step 1. Step 2 is I want to create and update the Docker environment file. So there's this .env _ example. So let's go back over to our environment here, and we can see that here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this, and I'm just going to paste this into a .env, just like that. Let's go through all the variables in this .env file together here. So at the .env, starting at the very top is kind of the project name. And I'm just going to leave it abc_app. You can see that that variable compose_project name is reused in a couple of places. Here is kind of the app domain. So what you're going to see is abc_app.local will be the app domain. And so later on, when we access our application, we're going to access it like https:// abc_app.local : and then we'll access it on whatever the port is down here. The next variable is the path to code. I believe strongly that we shouldn't mix our infrastructure as code, like our DevOps, our Docker code, in with our application code, because I want to have that freedom to be able to, kind of change and modify my DevOps code without affecting or having to check in something on my app code. So I like to keep it separate, and what that does is, from this current directory, we're going to go back one directory, which is we're going to be in the project, and then it's going to have a code directory there. And I'm not going to create that manually. We're going to let the kit create command create that in a little bit. Here you can select the versions for all the different services that we're going to use, and I'm just going to keep that the same. And here we can set the ports that are going to be exposed. If you have a lot of projects and you're running, maybe project 1, project 2, project 3, you may have to change these numbers. In fact, I have a couple of other projects running. I know that 8001 is taken. So I'm just going to go to 8005, 44305, and put a 5 on all of the ends of these. So, this is kind of my 5th project, let's say, but let's leave it like that. And then down here will be the database name. So this is going to be the same as that variable name, which is that abc_app at the top. And then you can see the database credentials. Okay, with that said, we have our env file saved, and we will have it exactly the way we want it. All right, so then our next step is, after we've created and updated the Docker environment file and adjusted the env things, we're going to run this kit create command. So let's come back over here. So we have a kit create. Before we run this command, let's talk about what it's going to do under the hood, and we'll go back and look at all the details. Under the hood, it's going to use this environment file to kind of create an environment for us for Laravel. It's going to create this directory. So back one directory, it's going to create a code directory in here. Then it's going to clone Laravel into that code directory, and it's going to do all the standard initializations that you normally have to do, like Composer install, npm build, and run any initial migrations that you might have. All of that stuff will be kind of done automatically for you. So let's go ahead and run this create command. And we'll just let it kind of work its magic, and then we'll kind of come back through and look and see what it all did for us. While it's running, I'm going to go ahead and we'll just go back to the top here, and let's take a look and see what it did. So like I was talking about, it created the /code directory. So now up here at the very top, we should see a code directory, which is we do. And it actually is opening up a tab right now. I didn't kind of switch over to the browser. It automatically did it for me, opened up the tab at that port. So we'll come back to this browser tab in a second, but let's go ahead and continue our review of what it was doing. So it created that directory, then it cloned Laravel into kind of that directory for us. Then it created the .env file, and how it does that is it actually copies the .env.example into .env. After it does that, then it updates a number of different variables that are in this .env file. So the app name, you can see it's abc_app. You can see there's an app key. It ran that PHP artisan key create or key generate. I forgot what the command is, but it ran that command to create this key for us. It generated an app URL based upon the information in the .env file for us. Down here, you can see kind of the DB connection. It set this up. Now the host, it uses the service name for the Docker container, which is MySQL. And that's how it resolves those kind of Docker services. So you can see the service name is here. All the information about the database, the user, and the password are entered for us. It switched over our session to Redis and our kind of queue connection to Redis and our cache storage to Redis. It switched our Redis host to kind of the Redis service container. And I think that's kind of the last update. So it did all that under the hood for you. It kind of prepared your .env file in the Laravel environment for you. It gets a little confusing because there's a .env under the code directory, which is the environment for Laravel. And then there's a .env file under the Docker directory, which is the environment for Docker. So don't get those two things confused. But right now it has updated the env file for kind of the Laravel. Then it started building the Docker containers. Then it did kind of that Docker compose, build command that we needed to build our containers. Then it started the application. And here you can see kind of the Docker application running. So if I go look at my Docker desktop here, you can see I have abc_app, which is my app name. And then I have these services running under there. So it has all the services running. They're all running under the ports that we configured. So let's go back to our kind of terminal trail here that we're just kind of going down. Then the next thing it did is it saw that we were missing a vendor directory. So it ran composer install for us. So it rebuilds kind of the composer container so we can use that. And then it runs composer install for us. And now you can see kind of all the composer downloading, installing all of the dependencies for PHP. After that, we start running some artisan commands. So it's building up kind of the artisan service. And then you can see your application key. So we ran that artisan command to set the key. Then we ran PHP artisan migrate, and it migrated our database tables. And then the next thing it's doing is it's kind of pulling down what it needs to create the npm service, and then it's running npm install. After it's done running npm install here, it runs npm build to kind of build our front end assets. Another check it does is based upon the domain. It looks at your host file. It's expecting to find it in /etc/hosts. If it finds that file and inside that file it doesn't find the domain, it'll append the domain to kind of your host file. So that domain is kind of already in your host file. So locally then that domain resolves. And then finally it opens up the browser tab. And then when it opens up the browser tab, this is kind of the session right now that we can see it's running. It's got that self-signed certificate. So you can see it says it's not secure. It's perfectly fine for our dev environment. It's just a self-signed cert here. Okay, so very quickly, in 3 steps, create a directory structure. Probably the one that took the most time from you personally will be kind of setting up your environment file, and then you run kit create, and that's it. And then here is kind of the list of things that kit create ran through and kind of talked about everything already. In the documentation, you'll also see the configuration settings, and it talks about all the different config settings and what they all mean. And you can kind of go through here and see what it is. And then it talks about your host file and being able to update it. If you're going to do it manually, you're going to have to add this in manually. But if you use the kit create command, it's done automatically for you. And then there's a usage section that talks about all the different kind of kit commands. Probably the easiest way to find all the kit commands is just using the terminal interface and just type in the word kit, and then it'll give you the menu options there. There's a couple of shortcuts. You can always type kit artisan migrate, but I find that sometimes I type that so much, I just want to have a kit migrate. So I just type in kit migrate and it does that for me. Here's about Horizon and starting up Horizon and the crons. And then if you ever want to get a terminal session. So let's go through a couple of these here. All right, so I'm going to close all these out. And so let's start using some more commands. So let's, for example, in our Laravel code, I want to add a job. So normally I would have to type PHP artisan make job, but we can use our kit command, right? Our kit shortcut. So I can say kit artisan make job, and then we're going to call it a test job. And so now it'll automatically go through and it'll create that test job for us. So under app up here, I can see jobs, and here's my new test job. And it's giving me a little squiggle, I think, because my PHP version here, I'll just set this to 8.3. But for the handle, drop in this super simple job. It logs some information, and then it sleeps for 10 seconds. Then it logs a little bit more information. Let's go ahead and set this up so that this job runs maybe once a minute. And in Laravel, under our routes, under console, here's where you can kind of add some schedules. Drop this line of code in here, then import classes. I want to import the facade there, and I want to import our test job class. So every minute, then Laravel will run this. Now, Laravel itself doesn't really run this. Normally, you have to kind of go through and set up a cron expression and follow all the instructions on the Laravel website. But for this makes it a little bit easy. So with the kit, first of all, let's start up Horizon, kit Horizon, and we can say kit Horizon start. And it automatically detected that we didn't have Horizon installed. So it's doing the composer install commands for Horizon, and it's setting all of that up for us. And then what it's doing now is it's automatically opened the Horizon dashboard for us. So that's there automatically set up for us. We haven't run any commands yet. Let's go back to our console here. So again, this kit Horizon start, you can see it did all of the composer, it's installing Horizon, and then actually ran Horizon so that it's running. And we'll be able to see Horizon running. If I go back to my Docker desktop, here's Horizon running right now. Next thing I want to do, let's go ahead and clear this out, is if I want this job to be scheduled, I have to start the cron. So we're going to say kit cron start, and that'll start up another container that's running the cron. And if I bring over the Docker desktop now, you can see here's cron running. If we go back and we look in this cron container here, we go under the exec, we can say cron tab -e, and you can see the cron tab expression. So once a minute, it's running this PHP Artisan schedule run command. So that's all set up for us. And to get that to run, we didn't have to do anything. All we did was we typed in our kit cron start command. That's it. So now with our cron service running, it's going to run the PHP Artisan schedule once a minute. What that does is that takes all of our jobs that it needs to run, and it'll put those on the queue for us. The PHP Artisan Horizon then will kind of pull those jobs off the queue and process those jobs. So let's go ahead and take a look at Horizon again. So right now you can see in the past hour, I just started this up. So we have 2 jobs that have run, and you can see the test job that ran. Okay, so to clean things up, we can back things out. We can say kit cron. You can either say stop, and it'll stop the container, and then later on you could restart it. Or if you're not going to use that container for a while, you can say kit cron destroy, and it'll destroy that container. So right now it's going to stop the container and it'll destroy it. So you can see it here, still running right now. And you can see it, the container has been removed, and then also the image has been deleted. So if we go back over here, now you no longer see it in the list. If you look at the images, the cron image is no longer available. Same thing with the Horizon. If you want to stop Horizon, you can stop Horizon the same way. And if we go back to our Docker desktop, you can see Horizon is no longer running. And finally, when you're kind of done for the day and you want to shut things down, you can either say kit stop, and that'll stop all the containers running. So you can see that here. Our ABC app is no longer running containers, but the containers for our ABC app are still kind of present. So that's one option. That way you don't have to rebuild your containers. And then once you're here, you can say kit start, and it'll take those containers and start them back up. Now, don't worry about your database data. Even if you were to delete your MySQL container, the database content is actually stored locally on your directory structure. So under the Docker, under database, there's a data directory, and this is mapped into the MySQL service. So it's really using this directory to store all its content. So here's my ABC app. So even if I were to destroy this image, I'm not losing my database data. And we can see that in a second here. So the other option, instead of kit stop, you can say kit destroy, and this will clean up all of the images. It'll stop them and delete them all. So it's done all that. If we go back here, you can see the containers running. I don't have ABC app running anymore, and I don't have the ABC app containers around. So it kind of cleans this up. And I didn't have any data in this database, but I had tables in there. So if I say kit start again, it'll go through that process of kind of creating those images. A lot of the kind of content was already cached. You can see it from the different layers is already cached. Very quickly started everything back up, and you can see my SQL services running. So if we go back to the Docker desktop, you can see the containers are running, and you can also see kind of the images that are available. And just as an exercise to kind of show you that the database content is still intact because it was stored locally, if I were to run Kit migrate, if that database was brand new, there wouldn't be any tables in there, and it would find some tables to migrate. But because there's actually tables and it's already set, there's nothing to migrate. And so kind of the content is already in that database. Okay, so let's do one more kind of common developer task that we typically will do is I like to attach an application that I can use to kind of query my database. So for that, I'm going to use data grip. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new connection. So it's going to be a data source. This is going to be a MySQL database because that's what it is. And it's going to ask me for all this information. For the name of this, I'm going to put the ABC app in here. And then I also like to prefix it with something like a .local so that I know that this is my local database and not my production database. And then as far as the connection, it's under localhost. It's not 3306, it's 33065. Username and password. This is Laravel, and that was secret. And let's go ahead and test this connection. So we're connected. So we're going to click OK. I'll have that ABC app here. And then once I'm here, I can start to select the different schemas that I want. And I just really want that one. That's the one that has the database in it. So we'll go ahead and that. Here's the database that we'll want and the tables that are available to us. So if I look at the migrations, you can actually see there's content in that database. I think it's a nice little update. This Kit facade really helps out, just getting things going, especially for beginner developers. If you don't really understand, all the little steps you have to do to get your container set and also to get your Laravel environment set, that Kit create command does a lot for you behind the scenes, and hopefully you enjoy using that. And once again, if you like content like this, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe.